Hello, my name is Jennifer Wolfe Williams, and I'm a trauma therapist. I wanted to talk to you about what I see in my counseling office when someone comes in with after effects of a traumatic event. And first, I should just say that what trauma is, it means that something has harmed or threatened you in a physical way, or something has harmed or threatened someone you loved, or you have seen that happen. And so, after these kinds of experiences, people respond in some pretty common ways, but usually they feel like there's something wrong with me. And so, my clients will come in and talk about their worries that no, there's something wrong with me since this thing happened. And yet, when they describe what they're experiencing now, I recognize that the problems are actually really normal responses to a terrible situation. And so I just wanted to create this video to talk a little bit about some normal ways that people respond to trauma. And I'm going to list 10 things that if you have experienced trauma, I'm going to guess you've probably experienced at least some of these, maybe all of them to different degrees. So the first one is unwanted thoughts. And unwanted thoughts could come in the form of bad dreams. Often they're just repeated thoughts about the terrible thing that happened. And you wish that you didn't have to remember that all the time. And many people say they try to not remember it, they try to move forward, but the thoughts keep coming back. So these unwanted thoughts, or we can call them intrusive thoughts, are just a constant presence that you want to be gone. And there are ways to make this problem much better. But the first thing I want my clients to know is that this is a really normal thing you're experiencing, and it's common to most people who go through trauma. The second thing that people experience after trauma is that they try to avoid some things that make them feel bad. So they might be avoiding other people or some kind of anything that's a reminder of the terrible events that happened. Some of us after trauma even try to avoid emotions. So we just try to go numb and not feel the sadness or the fear or the anger. So those are different kinds of avoidance, but avoidance is really common. Negative emotions, that's the third one. Negative emotions are also, they're universal for human beings, but they increase after experiencing trauma. As you would expect, there's a great deal of sadness, fear, anger, and sometimes that just feels overwhelming after a traumatic experience. And my clients say they feel like they're never going to get better, that those negative feelings are just ruling their lives right now. And so I want my clients to know that it's normal to experience that. I wish they didn't have to. It feels terrible. There are ways for it to get better, but just to know that this doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. There's also a sense of, and this is number four, an attempt to blame somebody that often goes in a direction that's a little bit safer than where the blame really belongs. So a lot of times my clients blame themselves, and they go over and over, if I had only done this, if I had only done that, when they are not the ones who did anything wrong. And so if you find yourself feeling a lot of guilt or even anger at someone who's close to you that you love, and sometimes it happens that way too, the blame goes to somebody who's safe and close to you. And these are not the people who actually committed the terrible crimes or violence or events that happened. But it's safer to blame myself than to blame someone who's dangerous. So that's what I tend to do, what my clients tend to do after a dangerous or threatening or traumatic situation. The fifth one is a feeling of emptiness, and many people just feel numb instead of a lot of sadness, anger, or fear, or maybe with it. Maybe it goes back and forth, but just kind of a numbness and an emptiness, a sense that nothing is fun anymore, nothing is pleasurable, but also a sense that life just doesn't have meaning. That kind of emptiness is really uncomfortable or even unbearable. And so I like my clients to know that it is also a normal trauma response and something that I wouldn't want anyone to interpret it as something wrong with me, but something that can be improved and something that happens to most people, many people after trauma. Isolation is a common response too, and this kind of comes from the idea that nobody else will understand. Nobody else has been through something like this, or nobody else around me has. Nobody else feels this way about it. Nobody shares these kinds of thoughts. And that's one piece of it. Or it can also, and or be the idea that other people are not safe. And so these kinds of thoughts lead the person who has been through a terrible time to just stay to themselves. Maybe we don't want anyone to see us cry. Maybe we don't want anyone to see us get angry. But for whatever reason, that staying to ourselves, it's one of the most hurtful things we can do, but it's a really common trauma response. And so I, again, would just want you to know that you can expect that of yourself, but there are ways to get better. Irritability is one that often surprises people because a lot of clients are really upset with themselves because they're angry at a family member all the time, a spouse, a child, a parent. They just feel angry at this person, or maybe 2 or 3 close people all the time over small things, and they know their anger is bigger than that small thing warrants, so they get upset with themselves about this. But what's going on there is the kind of trauma that you experienced was committed by someone that it's not safe to be angry at, and you can't, or maybe it's not even possible, and so you can't put that anger onto the right perpetrator of the offense. So it's just there inside you with no place to go. So the tiniest things in everyday life can make us feel really angry at someone that we're very close to, because it's safe to be angry at that person. And so again, I would just want you to recognize that that's a really normal response after trauma, and there are ways to make it better. Hypervigilance. So what that means, hypervigilance, is the constant looking out for safety. And in this case, the brain, because you've been through something really dangerous, your brain recognizes the danger is real. And now your brain is on the alert for danger all the time. And so this makes it difficult to, sometimes difficult to know when danger is real and when you're just feeling scared. And that takes time to sort out again, because your brain has to relearn it. Your brain is doing its job, trying to watch for things that might make you unsafe, but your brain has to relearn that, okay, this signal means danger and this signal is just a fear signal. It takes time to get there, and this kind of hypervigilance, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of mental energy. And with that kind of mental energy going into just basic safety, basic personal safety, then that brings you to the 9th and 10th problems that people often report. And the 9th one being poor concentration. Sometimes people are even afraid that there's something wrong with them cognitively, because they used to be able to learn more quickly or remember things better, and now it's very difficult. But what's actually going on is your brain is so busy trying to keep you safe, it doesn't have much space left for just remembering and focusing and concentration like it did before. It's not that you have less space overall, it's that more of it's dedicated to personal safety. And that too will change over time, and there are things you can do to work on that. But the important first step is to recognize that that's normal. And 10th, most everyone I talk to who has been through severe trauma has some kind of sleep problem. Usually it would be severe insomnia. Sometimes with clients who have been through repeated trauma over time, it's not unusual even for me to hear of insomnia at an hour and a half of sleep per night, which I find incredible. But at the same time, I see it a lot. So another thing that happens with sleep can be, of course, the nightmares. And some people sleep more than usual, but this could be a sign of depression. So sleep problems are really common after trauma as well. The most important takeaway here is just to recognize that what's happening to you happens to most people after the kinds of things that you've been through, after something threatening and dangerous. These 10 things happen to most people. They do usually get better. There are many things you can do to help make them better. And so it's important to recognize that. It's also important to know that it usually takes a lot longer than you think it should. So most of my clients will say, well, it's been X number of months, maybe even years. I should be better by now. And I'm not. So there's something really wrong with me. But it's important to realize that this kind of recovery and healing is slow and feels even slower to you than it looks from the outside. The other piece that I would want you to remember is that there are some positive outcomes to trauma too. There's a lot of growth, a lot of desire to serve others, and some potential for leadership that you wouldn't have had before. And I'll talk to you about that at another time. But just at this point to let you know that there's good that can come too, but you will struggle through these 10 or other negative results of trauma too. If you feel a desire to talk about those kinds of things, please feel free to contact me.